Hello dearies, it's me, your fearless leader, Menopause Taylor. This is an educational series on managing your menopause your way. And I'm a really nerdy teacher type, so I do everything in chronological order. I even give you quiz questions from time to time. But today is not one of those times. We are rolling along in a unit on osteoporosis. This is video 210, the 15th video in the osteoporosis unit. Can you believe we're still not even halfway through the unit? So you can see that it's a lot of material. And because it's a lot of material, I think it's a good idea to pause and put things into perspective periodically. In my book, this material is in chapter 29, all of which is on osteoporosis in both the first edition and the second edition. But today's video is not a stand-alone section in the book. Instead, it's going to address the question, why are so many women unaware that they have osteoporosis? And I'll be using what you've already learned to answer that question. Sometimes getting the big picture like this is really helpful in solidifying your understanding. The reason this video is so important is because even though osteoporosis is so common at post-menopause, and even though it has devastating effects, the vast majority of women who have it don't know they have it. You could be one of them. So I'll present this in a very orderly manner, like any good teacher, to shed light on the enormity of this problem. But I'll warn you right now, this video consolidates all the previous osteoporosis videos. If you have not watched the previous 14 videos on osteoporosis, you are not going to fully appreciate this one. I will be using the lessons from every one of the previous videos to explain why women don't know they have osteoporosis. So here goes. The first reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they have no idea that osteoporosis means bone loss. Most think it means brittle bones or thin bones. They think osteoporosis is about bone quality, not bone quantity. So they go about trying to prevent it by doing things that improve their bone quality while ignoring bone quantity. And the result is that they completely miss the boat at step one. You know, if you don't understand the most basic aspect of something, you will never get anything else right. This reminds me of my very first semester at Rice University where I attended college. It was the end of the semester, just one day before the final exam, and I was walking to the dorm with my roommate, Nancy. I was completely ready for the final and knew everything backwards and forwards, as they say. But apparently Nancy wasn't and didn't, because just before we reached the front door of our building, called Brown College, she said, "I just don't understand what's so special about carbon." My eyes nearly popped out of my head. Carbon is organic chemistry. The very first page of every textbook starts with carbon, and carbon is at the root of everything. And here it was, the day before our final, and Nancy didn't understand what we had learned on the very first day of the course. So to even have a clue that you have osteoporosis, you have to understand that it means bone loss. The second reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they never make the connection between bone loss and estrogen loss. There is an absolute direct cause and effect relationship between estrogen loss and bone loss. You go directly from one to the other. You don't need anything else. It's like a formula that works every time. Estrogen loss equals bone loss. But most women never get this message. They get distracted with all sorts of other things, like calcium, exercise, vitamin D, you name it. But they never seem to dwell on the fact that osteoporosis is all about estrogen loss. Of course, this has a lot to do with the fear of estrogen that people have these days. But just because you fear something does not mean it can't have any significant benefits. Unfortunately, women tend to talk about estrogen only in terms of its detriments. They think of it as bad. Well, if it's so bad, why do you lose your bone when it disappears? So women who don't acknowledge the role of estrogen in keeping their bone mass normal are unaware that they have osteoporosis. The third reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they fail to make the connection between estrogen gain at puberty and estrogen loss at menopause. In other words, they fail to understand that anything that impairs estrogen production at puberty will also impair their ability to ever reach peak bone mass. And if you never form enough bone in the first place, it's going to be really bad when you start losing it. So women who suffer with anorexia or bulimia don't know they have osteoporosis, and they probably have it long before they even reach post-menopause. This is because the focus goes toward the immediate anorexia or bulimia rather than toward their long-term effects. In general, people tend to be very nearsighted. They deal with the most obvious things, the here and now, while ignoring the things that aren't an immediate problem. Few women give a thought to menopause when they're dealing with puberty or young adulthood. And that's a shame because everything they do at those times has consequences later. So women who have eating disorders spend so much of their lives fighting the eating disorder that they fail to realize that the biggest fight of all is yet to come in the form of fractures from osteoporosis. The fourth reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is because they don't even know how to recognize post-menopause. I cannot tell you how many women have no idea what's happening to them even when menopause hits them over the head like a ton of bricks. They have 22 signs and symptoms of menopause that make them feel absolutely horrible, and they still don't realize it's menopause. Even when they do recognize it as menopause, they usually go into a state of denial and try to ignore it. Women will commonly defer acknowledging that it's menopause for years. All the while, they're losing bone like crazy. And even after finally acknowledging their symptoms as menopause, they will commonly take no action to learn about it or manage it for many more years. All the while, they're losing bone like crazy. This complete cluelessness about menopause and its consequences is precisely why I have embarked on delivering this education. And yet, there are women who declare that they don't need it. You would think that if you feel horrible, you'd want to find out why. And you'd want to find out what horrible things might be going on inside your body. But with all the denial, most women forfeit the opportunity. The fifth reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that it is a consequence of so many other diseases, including many autoimmune diseases, endocrine diseases, gastrointestinal diseases, and hematologic diseases. As with eating disorders, the focus gets directed to the specific disease with no attention paid to the long-term consequences. The fragmentation of the medical care system is to blame too. With each doctor managing only one organ system, osteoporosis often ends up as the casualty over which no one took charge. It just got lost in the shuffle. And shuffle is precisely what many of its victims will do for the rest of their lives. The sixth reason so many women don't know they have osteoporosis is because people don't talk about it. Despite the fact that it's much more common than breast cancer, most women talk mostly about breast cancer. Women are shocked when they learn all the things I'm teaching you here. They can't believe that they've never heard any of this. When they learn the facts, they're miffed that there isn't more education about osteoporosis. And to add to that, the seventh reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that when women do talk about it, they relay misconceptions and misinformation. Now, this goes back to the fact that most women think they can prevent osteoporosis by taking calcium. So you see, it's all very circular. These reasons for not knowing one has osteoporosis all hinge on one another. If you're under the illusion that you're preventing osteoporosis with a bunch of calcium and dairy, you aren't going to entertain the idea that you might still have the disease you are so ardently but ineffectively trying to prevent. The eighth reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they know nothing about the rate of bone loss. They are unaware that the most rapid bone loss occurs in the first 5 years of post-menopause. They don't know that they stand to lose 10% of their bone in those first 5 years. And they don't recognize the fact that bone loss then continues at a slower rate after that with a loss of 1% of their bone per year. If they suspect any bone loss at all, they assume that it will be slow and steady, lending itself to early intervention. They can't imagine it's happening as quickly as it does. And that brings us to the ninth reason women don't know they have osteoporosis. There are no symptoms. Despite the rapid rate of bone loss, there is nothing to tell you that you're losing bone. The very first sign is a fragility fracture of your spine, hip, or wrist. Now, you would think that anyone who fractures her spine, hip, or wrist would realize that she has osteoporosis. But guess what? They don't. In fact, the vast majority of women justify why they sustained a fracture, and they refuse to accept that they are deficient in bone. I mean, if that's not denial that goes to the bone, I don't know what is. The 10th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they assume that their prognosis after a fragility fracture from osteoporosis will be the same as any other fracture. They assume it'll heal just fine. They don't address it as the life-threatening, permanently crippling injury that it is. If they had any idea that it is so much more devastating than that, they might be a little less cavalier about the whole thing. The 11th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they are not familiar with that big, long list of risk factors I presented to you in video 203. If they knew what's on that list and that alone, they would be able to connect the dots. But the list of risk factors for osteoporosis is vast and varied. It encompasses all sorts of unrelated things that you might not ever connect to a single disease. And with so many different kinds of risk factors, most women are completely clueless about the majority of them. The 12th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that they have never heard of a bone density test. I mean, they've heard of pap smears, mammograms, and all sorts of other things that screen for diseases, but physicians fail to mention anything about bone density testing, so most women are unaware. Add to that the 13th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis. The guidelines for getting a bone density test designate age 65 as the age for getting the very first one. Women assume that guidelines serve the purpose of maintaining good health. They assume that they fall into the realm of prevention, or at the very least, into the realm of detecting a disease process early. None of these things is true for the guidelines on bone density testing. So, for a woman to get a bone density test early enough to diagnose osteoporosis early, she has to request it and probably pay for it. This is all wrong, but that's the state of affairs That's why I teach you all the ins and outs of how the medical system works. I don't want you to fall through the cracks, because a fall through this crack could quite literally cause a crack in your spine, hip, or wrist that cripples you for life. The 14th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that doctors' offices commonly tell you your bone density test results in a way that camouflages the truth. I've taught you that the T-score compares your bone density to that of a 30-year-old woman, while the Z-score compares your bone density to that of a woman of your own age and ethnicity. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to go by the Z-score. Z is for zany. It is the T-score that matters. T is for true. But doctors' offices commonly tell you that your bone density is fine based on your Z-score rather than your T-score. In those cases, your T-score could indicate osteoporosis while your Z-score does not. And if that's the case, you wouldn't know you had osteoporosis. The 15th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is that many doctors use the FRAX risk assessment tool for assessing your bone health. But the FRAX tool only assesses 7 of the 19 risk factors for osteoporosis. So if you have a bunch of the risk factors unaccounted for by the FRAX tool, you might not know you have osteoporosis. The 16th reason women don't know they have osteoporosis is because they are not told that premature menopause puts them at high risk for osteoporosis. This goes back to the lack of recognition of the connection between estrogen loss and bone loss. Just as every woman should know that estrogen loss equals bone loss, every woman who experiences premature menopause should know that premature menopause equals premature osteoporosis. That's 16 reasons that women don't know they have osteoporosis. Can you believe there are so many? And you can see now how easy it would be to change them all, right? There is no reason whatsoever that any woman should be unaware that she has osteoporosis. Like I said, these reasons derive from what I've taught you in all the osteoporosis videos thus far. You see how everything is connected? So, we are now ready to delve into all the things you can do to prevent or manage osteoporosis. Starting with the next video, I will address all of your options in all categories, including diet, lifestyle, vitamins, minerals, supplements, herbs, hormone replacement, and non-hormonal medications. But I'll do them one at a time. For some, I'll devote more than one video to the management option. Others may only require a single video, and we'll start with the first one next week. The first one will be on lifestyle options for preventing osteoporosis. In the meantime, schedule a consultation with me for anything you need at menopausetailor.me. Subscribe, and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'll see you next time. Bye.